I can remember the shock of the story of going there, and at the time Malta was in shock, and the government under Joseph Muscat, they're saying all the right things then. This is awful, we're going to investigate it, all of that stuff. And then slowly what happens is it's clear they don't, and there's something rotten with the investigation. When did you first go there?
So we started working on the case at Reporters Without Borders immediately. I remember that day I was here in London, my phone was ringing off the hook, and that struck me because this bureau had been open for just over a year, and that was the first time a case of anything happening outside of this country got that kind of reaction since I had been running the office here. And I ended up meeting the boys, Matthew, Andrew, and Paul, about 3 weeks later because they were coming through London for something. And really started to build up the campaign with the other international NGOs around that time. And I think the first time I actually went to the country was in March, following the October in which she was killed, and that was around the 10-year anniversary for her blog, Running Commentary. So I had been invited by local civil society groups to come to speak at some events there and to take part in a vigil then. So that was my first trip to the country. So you were there before me. But I've been many times since, not so much this year because of the lockdown, but this is the first anniversary that I'm not able to go to the country, and I think that's hard because I think it's important to show local civil society and the family and journalists in the country there that the world is watching, that we do care and that they have our support.
Yeah, so this isn't just about a bad government in Malta and the murder of one particular incredibly brave, great Maltese journalist. It's about a failure to defend properly the rule of law and to fight against this tsunami of dirty money which is coming from places like Russia and China and washing through somewhere like Malta and then ending up here.
Absolutely.
When we started, it felt like pissing on marble.
You have such a way with words.
However, what's happening now?
Well, 3 years on, in some ways there's been tremendous progress when we compare this case to cases that we work on in other countries, because ultimately there is at least a degree of impunity in nearly every killing of a journalist, and that's a very depressing statistic. I think that 9 out of 10 cases of murders of journalists are committed with impunity, and in fact many killings of journalists go completely uninvestigated. So in the broader international scale of things, the progress that has been achieved in Daphne's case is really remarkable. But I know to people on the ground, it's frustrating. It feels like there's nothing but obstacles. They feel really embattled and sometimes weary. There have been, every time it feels like there's progress, there's also steps back. So about 3 months after Daphne was killed, 3 hitmen were arraigned, and they remain detained to this day, but still have not been brought to trial. This is a very long time for anybody to be detained and not yet face trial.
No, they deny guilt, but the evidence against them is compelling.
The evidence against them is very compelling. Then at another point, there was an arrest of a self-confessed middleman, Melvin Toma, who actually got a pardon in exchange for testimony. This led in part to the arrest that was the most significant development so far in the criminal case of Jorgen Fennick, who is an alleged mastermind of this killing. So what's happening now is a compilation of evidence is ongoing. I was able to monitor part of it in July. I traveled to the country during a brief reprieve when Malta was added to our list of travel exemptions, and now it's back off. But for about 8 hours, I sat less than 2 meters from him. And his family and supporters are just in this tiny courtroom mixed with Daphne's family. And this is what they have to endure on a daily basis. I think that's really worth remembering, because from abroad, you don't feel that. But every day, Daphne's family is faced in some way with this, whether it's defamation lawsuits that they're defending against her, whether it's the compilation of evidence against this alleged mastermind, whether it's the public inquiry.
So the alleged mastermind, by the way, is Jorgen Fennick.
Yeah.
Now, he denies it, but he owns a casino. Dirty money, yet again. one of the free men who'd been charged with killing her, carrying out the assassination, gambled something like €400,000 more in Phoenix Casino. And for our book, we had a final chapter where we stuck it to all these people, and the title of the last chapter is "All Concerned Deny Any Wrongdoing," and we put the last bit of that chapter to Jürgen Fenech and said a number of questions, one of which was, how come this man, one of the free men who's been charged with killing, he's unemployed, how come he got €400,000 to gamble in your casino? Would that not be a bit suspicious?
There are many things that are suspicious but are explained away. It's worth noting though, a lot of our contacts in Malta are worried about the progress of this, that he could somehow be let off. It's really worth keeping an eye on, on this closely.
So what's very likely is that there is some abusive process glitch which is used so that the killers, they deny it, but the men for which there is compelling evidence against them can somehow get off, or the people who commission the killing. The difference is, though, going immediately after her death, and then the first anniversary and the second anniversary, that was really important, and that changed things. So I did this piece for Newsnight, and it's still there on YouTube, and I interview Muscat. And I had a really clever set of producers, as you always do on Newsnight, and I worked through the questions with them. But there he is sitting on my own, and he's being slimy, Joseph Muscat, and creepy, and he has a kind of easy but dishonest smile. And I was getting sick of it, and it's as live. It's not live, but we're filming it as live. And then I think I can get away with this because no one can stop me. And I say that some people say, sir, to the Prime Minister of Malta, that you're the artful dodger of Europe. And there was a flash where you could tell he just wanted, oh, fuck you. And it was a great, funny moment. And afterwards, all of the civil society activists in Malta just thought I was some kind of hero.
You ended up being the last, if I'm remembering correctly, the last foreign journalist that he gave an interview to.
Yeah.
That would be why.
That was why. So I was proud of that.
I've read through most of her blog several times in our research, and I love her tone. I have to say, she was acerbic. She pulled no punches, and you can see why they hated her.
Yes.
But
yes.
Again, they're forgetting, of course, that public figures have to be, tolerant of this kind of criticism. But she really got them by the jugular. So when she was killed, I believe there were 47 defamation suits opened against her, 5 criminal, 42 civil.
Yes. So Daphne was she got things wrong in terms of tone, but in terms of fact, she was right again and again and again.
And we're still finding that out. The investigation's taking place now.
Yes.
Not just related to her murder, but we've seen finally Keith Schembri, the former Prime Minister now, and we should talk about him a bit, but the former Prime Minister's Chief of Staff from the time, Keith Schembri, is now finally being investigated for economic crimes that Daphne wrote about 3 years ago.
Finally, but it took far too long to get that. And in the meantime, in the early days, I got threatening letters from Shillings for what I was writing, reporting for the BBC. I mean, the BBC lawyers handled it, but the letters were about me and my questions, and Shillings, there's a bloke called Keith Shillings. I've met him at a Private Eye party. He did a bit of good for Private Eye a while back, and I can remember meeting him at this Private Eye party. It was like Private Eye's 50th anniversary. And my then missus, we split up, we were mates, and she's my witness to this, but I went up to Keith Shillings and I just said, what the fuck are you doing here?
What did he have to say?
He moved away. I'm not a violent man, but I have a certain manner like a bull, beginning to take notice.
But you didn't get thumped that time.
No, he didn't thump me, no. But I got letters on behalf of Pilatus Bank, another story that Daphne wrote about brilliantly. And eventually the owner of Pilatus Bank gets nicked by the FBI, is arrested, is convicted. Ali Sadr, and now the Americans have let him go in one can only imagine some kind of crazy.
Let's talk about Pilatus for a minute, because you've had these sorts of defamation lawsuits, but this has been happening to the Maltese media for years.
Yes.
And in fact, the year that Daphne was killed, many other media had been.
This is it, by the way. The difference between the BBC and Byline TV, the wine is supplied in mid-interview.
But so Pilatus Bank, the year that Daphne was killed, many Maltese media had been threatened as well with defamation.
Yes.
I find bigger outlets can be so risk averse. It just perpetuates this problem because they bury it. They comply. They bury it.
Yes. So the BBC. I was physically assaulted asking a fair question. The Prime Minister of Malta on the streets of London, and the BBC didn't run a story. Have you ever been friends?
I've also had some interesting encounters with the former Prime Minister, to be honest with you, Joseph Muscat. Whether or not one could say it was a threat, maybe is a question for interpretation.
Tell me the story.
So I've been in to meet him twice.
When he was Prime Minister?
When he was Prime Minister. So at the 1 year mark, I had organised a joint mission of like-minded NGOs. So I believe there were 5 of our organisations went in together to see Muscat and some of his senior cabinet officials. And at that time, that was 1 year after Daphne was assassinated, they were on their best behaviour. They said things to us like, we also want justice for Daphne. Fast forward a year, we went in just as Reporters Without Borders because there wasn't a joint mission at that time. We had gone.
So this is the second anniversary.
This is the second anniversary, and it was just myself and Reporters Without Borders Secretary General Chris Abdullah. We were there together to mark the anniversary and had set up some meetings on the sidelines. And I have to say, it was just a bit of a different tone. And at the end of the meeting, Muscat walked up to me, crocodile smile. So you mentioned his smile earlier. I know that smile well. Walked up to me, shook my hand and said, "It's good to have an enemy like you." Now, again, that is a question for interpretation. And I didn't know quite how to react to it because it felt very intentional. It felt intentionally nuanced.
It's a threat.
Coming from a prime minister to somebody who has been very vocally campaigning in the case, I think it can be interpreted as threatening. I think it was inappropriate. And I think possibly, I also think about why he said that to me and what he intended. He probably wanted me to go public with it at the time because I'm a campaigner. I'm very public about these things. However, had I done so, I think it would have detracted from the work that we were doing in the country at the time in the campaign. Because it would have gotten a bit of attention and nothing good would have come of it, to be honest. I mean, we know what sort of a person Joseph Muscat is without that, added to the body of evidence against him. But I will never forget it, just the look on his face, that it was very calculated. And to feel that it was appropriate for the Prime Minister of an EU country to say this to a press freedom campaigner with the full confidence that he could. And we see, what his administration has done to others, how they demonize people. We've been talking about Peter Omtzigt. They've really attacked him because of his very effective work at the international level. They've attacked members of Daphne's family, including her eldest son, Daphne Caruana Galizia. Joseph Muscat himself, to this day, we're coming up on 3 years now, to this day, he has a defamation lawsuit opened against a dead woman and her son. But one reason that this is also important is not just for historical justice, but because if we understand fully what happened to Daphne and why, we can better protect journalists still working in Malta. And that's it, because there are a handful of journalists, and you and I know them all, because there are really not many, that continue to do this sort of in-depth investigative reporting, exposing corruption, exposing all of these things that powerful people still want to keep hidden. They do so at great risk. So we need to actively protect them, and we need to understand fully who is responsible for this and how it was able to happen in order to do that.
There's a great summary of all of this by Daphne's sister, Corinne Bella, who says, explain Malta in a sentence. And she says, North Korea with palm trees.
Well, I haven't been to North Korea.
I have.
You
it's
have.
Not, okay.
How does it compare? Of course you have.
By the way, how long we can go on like this till about 4 o'clock in the morning?